Michael Carter's life changed forever the day he found an alien child abandoned in the embassy. The 35-year-old security specialist never imagined he'd become the unwitting guardian of a Vidian princess, thrust into the center of an interstellar conflict that threatened to unravel humanity's fragile place among the stars. The newly established Earth Embassy buzzed with activity, a testament to humanity's recent foray into galactic diplomacy. Michael patrolled the winding corridors, his footsteps echoing against the sleek metallic walls. The Vidians, Earth's first extraterrestrial allies, were known for their advanced biotechnology and strict isolationist policies. Their presence here marked a significant milestone in human history. As Michael rounded a corner into a dimly lit maintenance passage, he froze. Huddled in the shadows was a small figure, unmistakably Vidian. The child's iridescent skin shimmered faintly, large eyes wide with fear. Despite years of training and strict protocols against alien-human interactions, Michael felt an overwhelming urge to help. He approached cautiously, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "Hello there," he said softly. "I'm Michael. Are you lost?" The child, a girl he realized, nodded hesitantly. She clutched a small, ornate device to her chest. Some kind of Vidian technology, he guessed. Michael made a split-second decision that would alter the course of galactic events. He scooped up the girl and, with a furtive glance around, hurried towards his private quarters. Once safely inside, Michael set the child down. "What's your name?" he asked, mind racing with the implications of his actions. "Xander," she whispered, her voice melodic and otherworldly. Unbeknownst to Michael, he had just rescued Xander, the sole heir to the Vidian throne. Hidden on the embassy by her royal guardian during a violent coup on their homeworld, Xander now represented the last hope for her people's legitimate government. As Michael attempted to make Xander comfortable, disaster struck. The child shifted, inadvertently activating the device hidden in her clothing. A soft chime echoed through the room, and Michael's blood ran cold. He just broadcast their location to the entire galaxy. Across the stars, two factions sprang into action. General Zix, leader of the Vidian usurpers, dispatched a covert strike team to eliminate the young heir and sever ties with Earth. Simultaneously, Captain Vrel, Xander's loyal guardian, raced to reach her first, desperate to protect the rightful heir and restore order to their world. Earth's government, caught unaware of the unfolding Vidian civil war, misinterpreted the sudden influx of alien ships as a potential invasion. Alarms blared throughout the embassy as emergency protocols initiated, plunging the facility into lockdown. Humanity's fledgling space defense force scrambled to mobilize, their untested ships and inexperienced crews facing an unknown threat. Trapped in the embassy with Xander, Michael's security training kicked into overdrive. He barricaded the door, mind whirling with possible escape routes. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. This child's fate, and possibly the future of human-alien relations, now rested in his hands. As the hours ticked by, Michael began to notice unusual occurrences. Objects in the room seemed to shift slightly when Xander was distressed. The air around her shimmered with an ethereal energy. These manifestations hinted at the advanced biotechnology that made the Vidians such a coveted ally, or potentially dangerous enemy. With time running out and threats closing in from all sides, Michael knew he had to act. He looked down at Xander, her alien features softened by an all-too-human expression of trust. In that moment, he silently vowed to protect her, whatever the cost. Little did he know, his actions in the coming hours would not only determine Xander's fate, but also shape humanity's standing in the galactic community for generations to come. The embassy's alarm system erupted into a cacophony of blaring sirens and flashing lights, plunging Michael's quarters into chaos. Xander's eyes widened with fear as she clung tightly to Michael's arm. He quickly scanned the room, his security training kicking into high gear. "It's okay, Xander. We'll be safe here," Michael reassured her, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He sprang into action, dragging a heavy metal desk across the floor to barricade the door. The screech of metal against metal punctuated the rhythmic wail of the alarms. As Michael fortified their position, his eyes darted around the room, cataloging potential weapons and escape routes. He grabbed a first aid kit from a wall-mounted cabinet and stuffed it into a duffel bag, along with water bottles and energy bars from his personal stash. While securing their supplies, Michael noticed Xander fidgeting with her clothing. "What's wrong?" he asked, approaching her cautiously. Xander's delicate fingers traced an invisible seam along her iridescent skin. With a soft click, a hidden compartment in her garment popped open, revealing a small, pulsating device. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it as the source of the earlier signal. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. Xander hesitated before carefully placing the device in his palm. It hummed with an otherworldly energy, its surface adorned with intricate, swirling patterns. Michael examined the device, searching for a way to deactivate it. His fingers brushed against a raised symbol, and suddenly the air shimmered before them. A holographic image materialized, depicting a regal Vidian figure. "Captain Vrel," Xander whispered, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The hologram spoke, its voice urgent and strained. "To whoever finds this message, you hold the fate of the Vidian people in your hands. The child with you is Xander, rightful heir to the Vidian throne. Our homeworld has fallen to General Zix and his usurpers. Xander must be protected at all costs. She is our last hope for—" The message cut off abruptly as an explosion rocked the embassy, sending tremors through the floor. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the lights flickered ominously. Michael's mind raced, processing the gravity of the situation. He knelt before Xander, meeting her gaze. "I promise I'll keep you safe," he said, his voice low and determined. "But we can't stay here. We need to reach the command center and alert Earth about what's happening. Can you trust me?" Xander nodded solemnly, her large eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond her years. With the young Vidian princess in tow, Michael cautiously opened the door, peering into the corridor. Emergency lights bathed the hallway in an eerie red glow, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. The distant sound of shouting and weapons fire echoed through the building. They moved swiftly but silently, Michael's years of training evident in every calculated step. As they rounded a corner, they encountered their first obstacle, a security checkpoint manned by an automated defense turret. Michael quickly pulled Xander back, narrowly avoiding detection. He knew the system was designed to target non-human life signs. "Stay here," he whispered, formulating a plan. Using his security clearance, Michael accessed a nearby control panel. His fingers flew across the interface as he initiated a system-wide diagnostic, temporarily disabling the checkpoint. They slipped past undetected, but Michael knew their advantage wouldn't last long. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Michael instinctively pushed Xander behind him, reaching for his sidearm. "Hold your fire!" The voice was familiar. James Foster, the embassy's lead diplomat, stepped into view, his usually immaculate suit disheveled and smeared with grime. Foster's eyes widened as he recognized Xander. "Is that, my God, the royal insignia? You're harboring the Vidian heir?" Michael tensed, unsure of Foster's allegiance. "James, I can explain." Foster raised a hand, cutting him off. "No need. I may be a diplomat, but I'm not blind to the bigger picture here. We need to get her to safety and alert our superiors about this civil war. I have access codes that can get us to the command center." Their uneasy alliance formed, the trio pressed on. Foster's diplomatic insight proved invaluable as they navigated the complex political landscape unfolding around them. As they approached the central atrium, the sounds of battle intensified. Michael held up a fist, signaling the others to halt. Peering around a corner, he witnessed a scene of chaos. Earth's security forces were engaged in a fierce firefight with a Vidian strike team. The attackers wore distinctive battle armor, their weapons far outclassing the human defenders. Energy bolts sizzled through the air, leaving scorch marks on the walls and floor. Michael's mind raced, analyzing the situation. The Earth forces were clearly outmatched, their tactics no match for the superior Vidian technology and training. "We need a diversion," Michael muttered, his eyes scanning the atrium. His gaze landed on a control panel near their position. "The fire suppression system," he realized aloud. With practiced efficiency, Michael accessed the panel and overrode the safety protocols. Moments later, a dense, obscuring foam flooded the atrium. Shouts of confusion erupted from both sides as visibility dropped to near zero. "Ooh, now's our chance," Michael hissed, grabbing Xander's hand. They darted across the atrium, foam swirling around their ankles. In the chaos, they became separated from Foster, his shouts quickly swallowed by the din of battle. As they neared the command center, Michael noticed something strange. Xander's skin began to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, pulsating in rhythm with her rapid heartbeat. She moved with unexpected grace and agility, easily keeping pace with Michael's longer strides. "Xander, are you okay?" Michael asked, concern evident in his voice. Before she could respond, a new threat emerged. A squad of Earth security forces rounded the corner, led by a stern-faced woman Michael recognized as Colonel Sarah Hawkins. "Freeze!" Hawkins shouted, her weapon trained on Michael. "Step away from the alien, Carter. That's an order." Michael's mind raced. He knew Hawkins was operating under false assumptions, but revealing Xander's true identity could put her in even greater danger. Time seemed to slow as he weighed his options, the consequences of his next move hanging in the balance. Xander's grip on his hand tightened, her skin now pulsing with an intense, ethereal light. Michael made his choice, prepared to face whatever came next. Michael's mind raced as he faced Colonel Hawkins and her team. In a split-second decision, he released Xander's hand and lunged for the nearby control panel. His fingers flew across the interface, muscle memory from years of training taking over. "Carter, stand down!" Hawkins barked, her weapon trained on him. Ignoring her command, Michael input the final sequence. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a sharp crack. The lights flickered, and the soldiers' weapons went dark. Confusion spread across their faces as they tried to reactivate their now useless equipment. "Run!" Michael shouted, grabbing Xander's hand once more. They sprinted past the disoriented security team, rounding a corner before Hawkins could react. Michael's eyes darted left and right, searching for an escape route. He spotted a maintenance hatch and quickly pried it open. "In here," he urged, helping Xander climb into the narrow shaft before following her inside. The dark, cramped space echoed with the sound of their labored breathing. Michael was about to activate his wrist-mounted flashlight when he noticed a soft, blue-green glow emanating from beside him. Xander's skin pulsed with bioluminescence, casting eerie shadows on the metal walls. "Xander, how are you doing that?" Michael whispered, awe evident in his voice. The young Vidian princess looked at her hands, seemingly as surprised as he was. I'm not sure," she replied, her melodic voice tinged with uncertainty. They pressed on through the maintenance tunnels, the gentle light from Xander's skin guiding their way. As they navigated the maze-like passages, Michael noticed something else extraordinary. Xander effortlessly pushed aside fallen debris and squeezed through gaps that should have been too small for her. Her strength and flexibility far exceeded what he'd expect from a child her size. After what felt like hours of crawling through the claustrophobic shafts, they reached a dead end. A heavy security door blocked their path, its control panel dark and unresponsive. Michael examined the door, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The EMP must have affected this section too. I'll try to bypass it manually." As he worked to remove the panel's casing, Xander stepped forward. She placed her delicate hand on the control interface, and to Michael's amazement, it sprang to life. Lines of code scrolled across the screen at impossible speeds, and within seconds, the door slid open with a soft hiss. "How did you do that?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Xander looked up at him, her large eyes reflecting a mix of wonder and apprehension. "I just knew how," she said softly. They emerged from the maintenance shaft into a dimly lit corridor. The distant sound of weapons fire and shouting reminded them of the danger that still lurked within the embassy. As they cautiously made their way through the hallways, Michael's trained ears picked up the sound of approaching footsteps. He pulled Xander into an alcove, holding his breath as a squad of soldiers in unfamiliar armor passed by. Their sleek, advanced weaponry and the cruel efficiency of their movements left no doubt in Michael's mind. These were General Zix's forces. Once the coast was clear, they continued their journey through the embassy. Michael's goal was to reach the secure bunker, but he knew they'd need help to get there safely. Rounding a corner, they found themselves in a large research lab. Banks of computers and strange equipment lined the walls, and in the center of the room stood a woman in a white lab coat, her back to them as she studied a holographic display. "Don't move," Michael said firmly, raising his weapon. The woman turned slowly, her hands raised. "Wait, I'm not your enemy?" she said, her voice calm despite the gun pointed at her. "I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead xenobiologist here." Michael kept his weapon trained on her but allowed her to explain herself. As Dr. Rodriguez spoke, recognition dawned in Xander's eyes. "You're the one who's been studying our people," Xander said, stepping forward. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. "Yes, and I can help you reach the secure bunker. But first..." Her eyes gleamed with scientific curiosity as she looked at Xander. "I need to take some genetic samples. The data could be invaluable." Michael hesitated, torn between the need for allies and his protective instinct toward Xander. "Fine," he said eventually, "but make it quick and I'll be watching your every move." As Dr. Rodriguez carefully collected samples from Xander, her equipment began to emit a series of rapid beeps. The scientist's eyes widened as she studied the readings. "This is incredible," she breathed. "Xander's genetic structure? It's unlike anything I've ever seen. These aren't just technological enhancements. She's evolving at an unprecedented rate." Before Michael could process this information, a massive explosion rocked the facility. Alarms blared as the lab's security shutters slammed down, sealing them inside. "They've found us," Michael said grimly, moving to secure the room's entrance. Dr. Rodriguez rushed to a computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "We're trapped," she announced, her voice tense. "General Zix's forces are approaching from the East Corridor, and oh no." "What is it?" Michael demanded, checking his weapon. "Colonel Hawkins and her team are coming from the west. We're caught between them." As if in response to the mounting tension, Xander's entire body began to glow with an intense light. Energy crackled around her, and suddenly, every screen in the lab came to life. Three-dimensional holograms sprang up, showing detailed schematics of the embassy and the positions of all forces within it. Michael stared in awe at the young Vidian princess. She had become a living nexus of information, interfacing directly with the embassy's systems. "Xander," he said softly, "can you hear me?" She turned to him, her eyes glowing with the same ethereal light that surrounded her body. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I see everything, Michael. I can guide us to safety." Michael's mind raced, formulating a plan. With Xander's newfound abilities, they had a chance to outmaneuver both threats and reach the secure bunker. But he couldn't ignore the toll it seemed to be taking on her. Xander's small frame trembled with the effort of maintaining the connection. "All right," Michael said, his voice filled with purpose. "Dr. Rodriguez, you're with us. Xander, show us the way." As they prepared to make their desperate escape, Michael felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. The fate of this child, the future of human-Vidian relations, and perhaps the balance of power in the galaxy itself, now rested in his hands. With both human and alien forces converging on their position, he knew that the true test of his skills, loyalty, and humanity was only beginning. Michael took a deep breath, steadying himself for what lay ahead. "All right, we need to move," he said, turning to Xander and Dr. Rodriguez. "Xander, can you maintain that connection to the embassy systems?" The young Vidian princess nodded, her glowing eyes fixed on the holographic display. "I can try, but it's difficult," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the lab. Michael studied the 3D map, tracing potential routes with his finger. We'll take this path, he decided, highlighting a series of maintenance corridors and less traveled hallways. It should keep us away from the heaviest concentrations of hostiles. Dr. Rodriguez gathered her equipment, stuffing vials of Xander's genetic samples into her lab coat pockets. "I'm ready," she announced, her voice tinged with a mix of scientific excitement and fear. They moved swiftly through the embassy, guided by Xander's otherworldly connection to the building's systems. Her bioluminescent glow provided just enough light to navigate the dimly lit corridors without drawing attention. Michael led the way, his weapon at the ready, while Dr. Rodriguez supported the increasingly fatigued Xander. As they rounded a corner, Michael held up a fist, signaling the others to stop. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hallway. He pressed himself against the wall, gesturing for Xander and Dr. Rodriguez to do the same. A squad of Earth security personnel appeared, led by a familiar face. Michael's heart sank as he recognized Lieutenant Davis, his former training instructor. "Hold it right there," Davis shouted, raising his weapon. "Carter, what the hell are you doing?" Michael stepped forward, hands raised. "Davis, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. We're trying to prevent a war." Davis's eyes narrowed, flicking between Michael, the glowing Vidian child, and the scientist. "I've got orders to apprehend any unauthorized personnel, especially those in contact with alien entities. Stand down, Carter. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Michael's mind raced, searching for a way out of this standoff. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, Xander stepped forward. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice resonating with power. A pulse of energy emanated from her small frame, washing over the security team. Their weapons and communication devices sparked and went dark. Davis stared at his useless rifle in shock. "What the—" Michael seized the opportunity, rushing forward to disarm the lieutenant. In a flurry of precise movements, he incapacitated Davis and his team, using non-lethal techniques to render them unconscious. "We need to move now," Michael urged, ushering Xander and Dr. Rodriguez past the fallen security team. As they continued their journey through the embassy's winding corridors, Dr. Rodriguez kept a close eye on Xander. The young Vidian's glow was dimming, her steps becoming unsteady. "Michael!" the scientist called out, her voice infused with concern. "Xander's vitals are fluctuating dangerously. These abilities, they're putting an enormous strain on her system." Michael glanced back, noting the fatigue evident in Xander's posture. He knelt down beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Xander, I know you're trying to help, but you need to conserve your strength. Can you maintain a minimal connection to the embassy systems without overexerting yourself?" Xander nodded weakly, the intensity of her glow diminishing further. The holographic displays flickered but remained active, providing a limited view of the embassy's layout and troop movements. Suddenly, the entire building shook with a massive explosion. Alarms blared as automated announcements echoed through the hallways. "Alert! Security systems compromised. Automated defenses activated." Michael's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. "General Zix's forces must have taken control of the main security hub. We need to—" His words were cut off by the whine of servos as a nearby security turret swiveled towards them. Michael reacted instinctively, tackling Xander and Dr. Rodriguez to the ground as energy bolts sizzled overhead. "This way!" Michael shouted, pulling them towards a side corridor. They ran as fast as they could, the sound of malfunctioning security drones and errant weapons, fire filling the air around them. As they navigated the chaotic embassy, Michael's mind whirled with the increasing complexity of their situation. The immediate threat of General Zix's forces, the compromised Earth security, and Xander's deteriorating condition all vied for his attention. Their frantic escape led them to a sealed door marked Xenobiology Labs Authorized Personnel Only. With the security systems in disarray, Dr. Rodriguez was able to override the lock, ushering them inside. The lab was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Pristine white surfaces and softly humming equipment created an almost serene atmosphere. But as Michael's eyes adjusted to the bright lights, he realized they had stumbled upon something far more sinister than he could have imagined. Lining the walls were stasis pods, each containing a grotesque fusion of human and Vidian physiology. Misshapen limbs, hybrid organ systems, and faces frozen in expressions of agony painted a horrific picture of scientific experimentation gone wrong. Dr. Rodriguez gasped, her hand covering her mouth. This is impossible. These experiments violate every ethical standard and diplomatic agreement we have with the Vidians. Michael's teeth gritted as he surveyed the room. It seems some factions within our government have been pursuing military applications of Vidian biotech. This goes beyond simple reverse engineering. Before they could process the full implications of their discovery, a piercing alarm sounded. Red warning lights flashed as a computerized voice announced, "Warning, containment breach detected. Experimental subjects released. Evacuate immediately." The stasis pods began to open, their occupants stirring to life. Michael grabbed Xander and Dr. Rodriguez, pulling them towards the exit. "We need to leave now." As they reached the door, Michael's comm unit crackled to life. James Foster's voice came through, distorted but urgent. "Carter, do you read me? We've received a transmission from Captain Vrel. He's offering Vidian biotechnology in exchange for Earth's cooperation in protecting Xander. But we're running out of time. Hardliners are pushing for a full assault on all Vidian forces." Michael's mind raced as he processed this new information. The sound of breaking glass and inhuman growls from the lab spurred him to action. He ushered Xander and Dr. Rodriguez into the hallway, sealing the lab door behind them. "Foster, I read you," Michael responded, his voice tense. "We've uncovered a situation here that complicates things further. I need to know. Can you secure a direct line to the diplomatic channels?" As Foster confirmed, Dr. Rodriguez pulled Michael aside, her eyes wide with excitement and trepidation. "Michael, I've been analyzing Xander's genetic samples, her evolving abilities. They could be the key to stabilizing these hybrid creatures, maybe even revolutionizing human medicine. This information could change everything." Michael looked at Xander, who leaned heavily against the wall, her glow now barely visible. The sound of approaching combat echoed from both directions of the corridor. In that moment, he knew he faced a decision that would shape the future of human-Vidian relations and potentially the course of galactic history. Time seemed to slow as Michael weighed his options. Continue to the secure bunker with Xander, or make a desperate attempt to reach the command center and influence the diplomatic negotiations directly. Each choice carried enormous risks and potential consequences. The hybrid creatures began pounding on the sealed lab door, their inhuman strength threatening to break through at any moment. Alarms blared, warning of approaching forces from multiple directions. Michael looked at Xander and Dr. Rodriguez, then back at his comm unit, the weight of his decision pressing down upon him. With a deep breath, Michael made his choice, knowing that whatever path he chose would test the very limits of his skills, loyalty, and understanding of what it truly meant to be a protector, not just of Xander, but of humanity's place in a much larger, more complex universe than they had ever imagined. Michael's mind raced as he processed the information flooding in from all sides. The weight of his decision pressed down upon him, but he knew there was only one choice that could potentially salvage this rapidly deteriorating situation. "Now we're heading to the command center," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "It's our best shot at stopping this war before it starts." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and persistence. Xander, her glow now barely visible, managed a weak smile. They moved swiftly through the embassy's winding corridors, Michael leading the way with his weapon at the ready. He used Xander's fading connection to the building systems to navigate around pockets of fighting and malfunctioning security drones. As they rounded a corner, a horrifying sight stopped them in their tracks. One of the escaped hybrid creatures stood before them, its misshapen form a grotesque fusion of human and Vidian features. Bulbous growths pulsated along its arms, and its face was a twisted mask of pain and rage. The creature lunged at them with surprising speed. Michael pushed Xander and Dr. Rodriguez behind him, meeting the hybrid's charge head-on. He ducked under a wild swing, using the creature's momentum against it to slam it into the wall. But the hybrid was far stronger than any human opponent. It recovered quickly, its mutated limbs lashing out with terrifying force. Michael dodged and weaved, his combat training kicking in as he searched for an opening. The air suddenly crackled with energy. Xander, her eyes glowing faintly, had stepped forward. A pulse of ethereal light erupted from her small frame, washing over the hybrid. The creature froze mid-attack, its movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Michael seized the opportunity. He launched into a flurry of precise strikes, targeting the hybrid's joints and nerve clusters. With a final decisive blow, he sent the creature crumpling to the ground, unconscious. Panting heavily, Michael turned to check on his companions. Dr. Rodriguez was already kneeling beside the fallen hybrid, a small device in her hand as she collected a tissue sample. "This could be crucial," she explained, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "If I can analyze the connection between its unstable genome and Xander's abilities, we might find a way to help these poor creatures." Xander swayed on her feet, the burst of power having drained her remaining energy. Michael scooped her up in his arms, knowing they needed to move quickly. They had barely made it another 100 meters when the staccato sound of weapons fire erupted ahead. Michael pulled them into an alcove, peering around the corner to assess the threat. A squad of General Zix's elite soldiers had taken up positions in the corridor, their advanced weaponry carving chunks out of the walls as they fired at unseen targets. Michael's mind raced, formulating a plan. He spotted a maintenance hatch nearby, remembering the maze of service tunnels that ran throughout the embassy. "This way," he whispered, ushering Dr. Rodriguez towards the hatch. "We can bypass them through here." As they slipped into the narrow passageway, the sounds of battle intensified behind them. Michael led them through the dimly lit tunnels, relying on his memory of the embassy's layout to guide their path. Suddenly, a stray energy bolt punched through the thin wall beside them, showering them with debris. Michael pushed Dr. Rodriguez ahead, shielding Xander with his body as they ran. "Go!" he shouted as they emerged into another corridor. "Keep heading for the command center." But it was too late. The firefight had spilled into their path, cutting Dr. Rodriguez off from Michael and Xander. She dove for cover behind an overturned desk, clutching her precious data to her chest. "I'll find another way," she called out, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Don't wait for me." Michael hesitated for a split second before nodding grimly. He turned and ran, cradling Xander close as they navigated the war-torn embassy. As they neared the command center, a familiar voice rang out. "Freeze! Hands where I can see them." Colonel Hawkins stood before them, flanked by her security team. Their weapons were trained on Michael and Xander, but uncertainty flickered in Hawkins' eyes. Michael slowly raised one hand, keeping Xander secure with the other. "Colonel, listen to me. We don't have much time. What's happening here goes far beyond simple politics or military action. The fate of both our species hangs in the balance." Hawkins's grip on her weapon tightened. "I have my orders, Carter. I can't just—" "Ma'am!" One of Hawkins' subordinates interrupted, his hand pressed to his earpiece. "We're receiving reports of Vidayan ships engaging in orbit. Earth forces are being drawn into the conflict." Michael seized the moment of distraction. "Colonel, think about the long-term consequences. If we don't act now, we'll be looking at full-scale interstellar war. Is that really in humanity's best interest?" Hawkins' purpose visibly wavered. Before she could respond, rapid footsteps approached from behind. James Foster appeared, slightly out of breath and clutching a data pad. "He's right," Foster said, nodding to Michael. "I've got confirmation from multiple sources. Captain Vrel's loyalist forces are battling General Zix's cloaked ships in orbit. Our own fleet is caught in the crossfire." The corridor shook as a distant explosion rocked the embassy. Alarms blared, and an automated voice announced, "Alert, security breach in command center. Unknown hostiles detected." Foster's eyes widened. That has to be General Zix. He must have used the confusion to infiltrate the embassy personally. Michael locked eyes with Colonel Hawkins. "We're out of time. If we don't stop this now, there won't be an embassy left to defend. Let us through." Hawkins stood frozen for a moment, the weight of her decision evident on her face. Finally, she lowered her weapon. "All right, Carter, but we're coming with you. This is still my embassy." They moved swiftly towards the command center, Hawkins and her team providing covering fire as they encountered pockets of resistance. Michael's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan that would neutralize General Zix, protect Xander, and somehow bring this escalating conflict to a peaceful resolution. As they approached the command center's blast doors, the sounds of struggle echoed from within. Michael set Xander down gently, meeting her tired but determined gaze. "Stay close to me," he said softly. "Whatever happens in there, remember that I'm here to protect you." Xander nodded, a faint glow returning to her eyes. "I trust you, Michael," she whispered. With a deep breath, Michael signaled to Hawkins. She nodded grimly, inputting the override code to open the blast doors. The scene that greeted them as the doors slid open was one of awe-inspiring chaos. General Zix stood in the center of the room, his ornate uniform torn and bloodied. He held James Foster in a chokehold, a Vidian energy weapon pressed against the human's temple. "Ah, the young princess finally arrives," Zix sneered, his eyes glittering with triumph. "Come now, child, surrender yourself, and I might be persuaded to spare these humans you've grown so fond of." Michael stepped forward, placing himself between Xander and the general. His mind raced, searching for a way to defuse this powder keg before it exploded, taking 2 civilizations with it. Behind him, Colonel Hawkins and her team fanned out, their weapons trained on General Zix. The air crackled with tension as Michael prepared to face down the Vidian warlord, knowing that his next words and actions could well determine the fate of Earth and Vidia alike. Michael's eyes locked with General Zix's, the Vidian's face twisted in a cruel sneer. The command center hummed with tension as Colonel Hawkins and her team spread out, weapons trained on the hostile forces. "Let him go," Michael demanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Zix tightened his grip on Foster's throat. "You're in no position to make demands, human. The princess comes with me, or this one dies." Before Michael could respond, a soft glow emanated from behind him. Xander stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with an otherworldly light. The air crackled with energy as she raised her hand. Suddenly, every screen in the command center flickered to life. The stern faces of Earth's military leaders vanished, replaced by a chaotic scene of space warfare. Vidian ships engaged each other in a deadly dance, energy weapons flashing against the backdrop of stars. "What is this?" Zix snarled, his grip on Foster loosening slightly as he stared at the screens in disbelief. Michael seized the moment of distraction. He launched himself across the room, his body a blur of motion. His shoulder connected with Zix's midsection, driving the air from the general's lungs. Foster stumbled free, gasping for air as he scrambled away from the melee. Zix recovered quickly, his advanced Vidian physiology granting him inhuman strength and speed. He lashed out with a vicious backhand that caught Michael across the jaw, sending him staggering backward. The two circled each other, trading blows in a furious exchange. Michael's Earth Special Forces training allowed him to anticipate and counter many of Zix's moves, but the Vidian's raw power was overwhelming. As they fought, Xander's abilities continued to evolve. Her small frame trembled with effort as she interfaced with the embassy's communication systems. Her voice, amplified and broadcast throughout the facility, rang out clear and strong. "People of Earth and Vidia, hear me," she pleaded. "What you're witnessing is the truth. General Zix has betrayed his own people, endangering both our worlds for his own selfish ambitions." The command center's doors burst open, and Dr. Rodriguez rushed in, clutching a datapad to her chest. Her eyes widened at the scene before her, but she quickly composed herself and approached Foster, who was just regaining his feet. "Mr. Foster," she said urgently, "I have critical information. Xander's genetic structure. It's the key to everything. We can stabilize the hybrids, advance human medicine beyond our wildest dreams, but only if we work together, humans and Vidians. Foster's eyes lit up with understanding. He turned to the screens where Earth's officials had reappeared, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. "Did you get that?" Foster asked, his voice hoarse but determined. "We're on the brink of something revolutionary here. We need to end this conflict now." On the screens, the officials conferred briefly before nodding in agreement. One of them, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, leaned forward. "We're ordering our forces to stand down and cooperate with Captain Vrel's loyalists. This madness ends now." Zix, hearing his plans unravel, let out a roar of fury. He shoved Michael aside and reached into his torn uniform, pulling out a small device. "If I can't have victory," he snarled, "then no one will." He pressed a button on the device, and immediately alarms began to blare throughout the embassy. The floor trembled beneath their feet as the power core began to overload. Michael, recognizing the imminent danger, redoubled his efforts. He lunged at Zix, grappling with the general's arm, trying to wrest the device from his grasp. Xander, her face pale with exhaustion, raised her hands once more. Her entire body glowed with an intense light as she connected directly with the embassy's systems. The trembling subsided slightly as she fought to contain the power surge, but the strain on her was evident. "She can't hold it for long," Dr. Rodriguez shouted over the blaring alarms. "We need to shut down the core manually." Michael, still locked in combat with Zix, gritted his teeth. With a supreme effort, he managed to slam the general's arm against a nearby console. The impact loosened Zix's grip on the device, sending it clattering to the floor. In that moment, the tide turned. Earth's forces, now coordinating with Vrel's loyalists, began to systematically take down Zix's remaining troops, both in the embassy and in orbit. Michael finally gained the upper hand, driving his knee into Zix's solar plexus and following up with a devastating uppercut. The general crumpled to the ground, unconscious at last. But their victory was short-lived. Xander's knees buckled, her glow flickering erratically. Michael rushed to her side, catching her before she hit the floor. "The systems," she whispered, her voice weak. "I can't hold them." Dr. Rodriguez knelt beside them, her face grim as she checked Xander's vital signs. "Her body is breaking down under the strain. We need to stabilize her immediately or we'll lose her." Foster, who had been coordinating with the officials on screen, turned to them with urgency in his eyes. "The embassy's systems are still critical. If we don't do something soon, this whole place will go up in flames." Michael's mind raced, weighing their limited options. "The med bay," he said suddenly. "It has the most advanced equipment in the facility. If we can get Xander there, maybe we can save her and find a way to stabilize the systems." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, already gathering her research materials. "It's risky, but it's our best shot. We'll need to move fast." Michael scooped Xander into his arms, her small form feeling frighteningly fragile. "Lead the way, Doctor. Foster, can you coordinate the evacuation and containment efforts from here?" Foster nodded grimly. "Go, save her. We'll handle things on this end." With that, Michael and Dr. Rodriguez raced out of the command center, leaving behind the chaos of alarms and shouted orders. The embassy shuddered around them as they navigated through corridors filled with panicked staff and malfunctioning equipment. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of hybrid creatures. Michael tensed, preparing for a fight, but to his astonishment, the hybrids did not attack. Instead, they gathered around Xander, their misshapen forms seeming to resonate with her fading energy. "Remarkable," Dr. Rodriguez breathed. "They're responding to her presence. It's as if they recognize her as a stabilizing force." With the hybrids forming a protective circle around them, they pressed on towards the medbay. The embassy's structural integrity was failing rapidly, with sections of the ceiling collapsing behind them as they ran. Finally, they burst through the medbay doors. Dr. Rodriguez immediately set to work, her fingers flying over control panels as she prepared the advanced medical equipment. Michael gently laid Xander on the central bed, her skin now pale and clammy. Hold on, he murmured, squeezing her hand. Just hold on a little longer. As Dr. Rodriguez initiated the experimental procedure, alarms throughout the embassy reached a deafening crescendo. The fate of Xander, the embassy, and the future of human-Vidian relations now hung in the balance, dependent on the success of this high-stakes endeavor. Michael stood by, his heart pounding, as the medical equipment hummed to life around Xander's still form. He watched the monitors intently, silently willing them to show some sign of improvement. The embassy trembled ominously around them, a stark reminder of the precious little time they had left. The embassy trembled ominously around them, a stark reminder of the precious little time they had remaining. Dr. Rodriguez's fingers flew across the control panel, initiating the experimental procedure. The medical equipment hummed to life, a fusion of Earth and Vidian technology interfacing with Xander's unique physiology. Michael watched intently, his breath caught in his throat as he silently willed the young Vidian to hold on. Vital signs are fluctuating, Dr. Rodriguez muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. I'm adjusting the neural stabilizers to compensate for her elevated synaptic activity. As the doctor worked, Michael's comm unit crackled to life. James Foster's voice came through, strained but determined. Carter, we've managed to negotiate a temporary ceasefire with Captain Vrel's loyalist fleet. It's buying us time, but the embassy systems are still critical. We need to contain the situation fast. Michael glanced at the flickering lights and the trembling walls around them. Understood. I'll see what I can do to stabilize the infrastructure. He moved to a nearby terminal, his security training kicking in as he assessed the embassy's failing systems. With swift, precise movements, he began rerouting power from non-essential areas to maintain life support and structural integrity. Diverting power from the outer ring, he announced. It should buy us a few more minutes. As Michael worked, he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. The hybrid creatures that had escorted them to the med bay were reacting to Xander's treatment. Their unstable forms seemed to shimmer and shift, gradually settling into more cohesive shapes. Dr. Rodriguez gasped, her eyes widening as she glanced at her data pad. Incredible! The procedure is having a ripple effect on the hybrids. Their cellular structure is stabilizing, and I'm detecting increased neural activity. This could be the solution we've been searching for. Before Michael could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility, their urgent wailing cutting through the air. He rushed to check the nearest status display, his heart sinking as he read the data scrolling across the screen. The main power core is going critical, he said, his voice tight with tension. If it blows, it'll take the entire embassy with it, and any chance of peace between our worlds. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from Xander's bedside, her face pale. We can't stop now. The procedure is at a critical phase. If we interrupt it, we could lose Xander forever. Michael's mind raced, weighing their limited options. With a grim nod, he made his decision. Keep going, I'll handle the core. He sprinted from the medbay, the sound of alarms growing louder as he navigated the damaged corridors. Debris littered his path, and he narrowly avoided a collapsing section of ceiling as he rounded a corner. Ahead, a group of Zix's loyal soldiers blocked his path, their weapons raised. Michael didn't break stride. He launched himself forward, using his momentum to slide beneath their line of fire. In one fluid motion, he swept the legs out from under the nearest attacker, using the man's own weapon to incapacitate the others. With the path clear, Michael pressed on, his lungs burning as he pushed himself to his limits. He burst into the core room, immediately assaulted by the acrid smell of burning circuitry and the deafening roar of overloading systems. The central column pulsed with unstable energy, arcs of power lashing out to scorch the surrounding equipment. Michael's hands flew across the main control panel, attempting to initiate an emergency shutdown. The system stubbornly refused to respond, too damaged to follow normal protocols. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he frantically searched for a solution. His eyes landed on the manual override controls, and a desperate plan formed in his mind. Without hesitation, Michael began the dangerous process of physically disconnecting the overloading sections. Sparks flew as he worked, the heat from the failing core searing his skin. He gritted his teeth against the pain, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. As he struggled with a particularly stubborn connection, Michael felt a sudden shift in the air around him. The erratic energy emanating from the core seemed to stabilize, if only slightly. He glanced at the nearest status display, his eyes widening in disbelief. Somehow, Xander's abilities were spreading throughout the embassy's systems, interfacing with and repairing damaged technology. It was as if her very essence was flowing through the facility, buying him precious seconds to complete his task. With restored dedication, Michael redoubled his efforts. His hands moved with precision, disconnecting the final overloading sections just as the core reached critical levels. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought he'd been too late. Then, miraculously, the core's energy dispersed harmlessly, its angry red glow fading to a cool, steady blue. Michael sagged against the control panel, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. He allowed himself only a moment's respite before pushing himself upright. There was still work to be done. As he made his way back to the medbay, Michael's comm unit crackled to life once more. Foster's voice came through, tinged with excitement. "Carter, you're not going to believe this. We've just received word from Earth. The conflict in orbit is over. Captain Vrel's forces have defeated the last of Zix's ships." Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "That's the best news I've heard all day, sir." "There's more," Foster continued. "Earth's leaders are impressed by what's happened here. They're talking about pursuing a deeper alliance with the Vidayan loyalists. We might actually pull this off, Carter." As Michael approached the medbay, he saw Colonel Hawkins and her security team maintaining a defensive perimeter. The colonel nodded to him as he passed, a newfound respect evident in her eyes. Inside, the atmosphere had transformed. The frantic energy of earlier had been replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Dr. Rodriguez looked up as Michael entered, a tired smile on her face. "It worked," she said simply, gesturing to the bed where Xander lay. Michael moved closer, his breath catching as he saw the young Vidian. Xander's skin glowed with a steady, healthy luminescence, her chest rising and falling in a strong, regular rhythm. As he watched, her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with newfound clarity. "Michael," she said, her voice weak but steady, "you're okay." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Thanks to you. How are you feeling?" Xander closed her eyes for a moment, as if taking inventory of her body. When she opened them again, there was a spark of wonder in her gaze. "Different, stronger. I can feel everything." As if to demonstrate, Xander raised her free hand. The lights in the medbay brightened, and the residual damage to the equipment seemed to repair itself before their eyes. The hybrid creatures, still gathered nearby, let out soft sounds of contentment as their forms stabilized further. Dr. Rodriguez watched in amazement, her datapad forgotten in her hand. "Extraordinary, Xander. Your abilities haven't just stabilized, they've evolved. The potential applications for both human and Vidian medicine are staggering." Before they could discuss further, the facility's communication system crackled to life. Captain Vrel's voice filled the air, a mix of relief and anticipation evident in his tone. "This is Captain Vrel of the Vidian Loyalist Forces. We are preparing to dock with the embassy. We come in peace, seeking to reunite with our young heir and negotiate a lasting alliance with Earth." Michael exchanged glances with Dr. Rodriguez and Xander, the weight of the moment settling over them. They stood on the precipice of a new era in human-Vidian relations, one that would shape the destinies of both their peoples. As they prepared to meet the incoming delegation, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges and opportunities still lay ahead. The data from Dr. Rodriguez's procedure had unlocked knowledge of biotechnology beyond anything previously imagined. Such power, he knew, would not come without its own set of complex ethical and political dilemmas. For now, though, Michael allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. He looked at Xander, her newfound strength evident in the set of her shoulders and the determined glint in her eye. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, their journey had only just begun. As the immediate crisis subsided, the embassy buzzed with renewed energy. The damaged corridors, once filled with chaos and destruction, now teemed with a mix of human and Vidian officials rushing to prepare for the arrival of Captain Vrel's delegation. Michael stood at attention near the main airlock, his uniform freshly pressed despite the recent ordeal. Beside him, Xander fidgeted, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Dr. Rodriguez completed their welcoming party, her datapad clutched tightly as she eagerly anticipated the wealth of scientific knowledge this meeting could bring. The airlock cycled with a hiss of pressurized air. As the door slid open, Captain Vrel stepped through, flanked by his most trusted advisors. The Vidian leader's eyes immediately locked onto Xander, a look of wonder and relief washing over his face. "My child," Vrel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've come home to us at last." Xander took a hesitant step forward, then another. Suddenly she broke into a run, throwing herself into Vrel's arms. The captain embraced her tightly, his own bioluminescence flaring brightly in response to the contact. Michael watched the reunion with a bittersweet smile. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Ambassador Foster standing beside him. "You've done well, Carter," Foster said quietly. "What happens next will shape the future of both our species." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Michael found himself at the center of intense negotiations, his unique position as Xander's protector and his role in averting disaster making him a key figure in shaping human-Vidian relations. In one such meeting, Michael sat across from Captain Vrel, the two of them poring over proposed terms for a joint scientific initiative. "Dr. Rodriguez's work is truly groundbreaking," Vrel said, gesturing to a holographic display of the doctor's research. "Combined with our own biotechnology, the potential applications are staggering." Michael nodded, but his expression remained cautious. "It's precisely that potential that concerns some of my superiors. They fear the development of biological weapons or other military applications." Vrel's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. "And my own people worry that humans might use this knowledge to gain an unfair advantage. How do we move forward in the face of such mistrust?" Michael leaned forward, his eyes intense. "With transparency and cooperation, we need to establish joint oversight committees, open channels of communication, and clear guidelines for the ethical use of this technology." As he spoke, Michael felt a familiar presence enter the room. Xander approached the table, her movements more graceful and assured than ever before. "Perhaps I can offer a solution," she said, her voice carrying a new weight of authority. "What if we created a neutral ground, a place where both our species could work together, learn from each other, and build trust?" Michael and Vrel exchanged glances, intrigued by the idea. Xander continued, her excitement growing. "Imagine a joint human-Vidian space station, a symbol of our cooperation and a hub for diplomacy, research, and cultural exchange." The room fell silent as the implications of Xander's proposal sank in. Then slowly, Vrel nodded. "It's ambitious," he said, "but it could work. What do you think, Mr. Carter?" Michael felt a surge of pride as he looked at Xander. The scared, defenseless child he had first encountered had grown into a visionary leader. "I think it's exactly what we need," he said firmly. As plans for the space station progressed, Michael found himself grappling with a personal dilemma. His growing attachment to Xander conflicted with his duty to Earth and his uncertainty about his place in this new interstellar landscape. One evening, he stood alone on the embassy's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The door behind him slid open, and Dr. Rodriguez joined him at the window. "Credit for your thoughts?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. Michael sighed. "I'm trying to figure out where I fit in all of this. My whole life has been about serving Earth, but now—" Rodriguez nodded understandingly. "Now you feel torn between two worlds, but consider this, Michael. Maybe your true service to Earth lies in bridging the gap between our species." Her words echoed in Michael's mind long after she had left. As dawn broke over the alien landscape outside, he made his decision. The inauguration of the new space station, christened Harmony, was a spectacle unlike anything Michael had ever seen. The station hung in space, a gleaming testament to what could be accomplished when two species work together. Michael stood on the main observation deck, surrounded by dignitaries from both Earth and Vidia. His new uniform, a blend of human and Vidian design, marked his position as human liaison to the station. Xander stepped up to the podium, her presence commanding the attention of all present. As she began to speak, Michael couldn't help but marvel at her transformation. "Not long ago, I was an orphan, lost and alone," Xander said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "But thanks to the compassion of one human, I found not just a protector, but a family." Michael Carter's actions set in motion a chain of events that has led us here today to the dawn of a new era of cooperation between our peoples. As Xander's speech continued, Michael felt a swell of emotion in his chest. He watched in awe as she interfaced with the station's systems, creating a dazzling light show that represented the intertwining of human and Vidian DNA. The ceremony culminated in the signing of the Harmony Accords, a comprehensive treaty outlining the terms of human-Vidian cooperation. As Xander took her place among the signatories, Michael couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. Later, as the festivities wound down, Michael and Xander found themselves alone on the observation deck. They stood side by side, gazing out at the star-filled expanse before them. "So," Xander said, a hint of teasing in her voice, "are you ready for your new role as a galactic diplomat?" Michael chuckled. "I'm not sure anyone's ever really ready for something like this, but with you by my side, I think we can handle whatever comes our way." Xander's hand found his, her bioluminescence pulsing gently in sync with his heartbeat. In their reflection on the window, Michael saw not just a human and a Vidian, but a family forged through adversity and mutual understanding. As they stood there, looking out at the endless possibilities that stretched before them, Michael knew that their greatest adventures were yet to come. The abandoned alien orphan and the Earthling who had taken her in had become the architects of a brighter future for both their worlds. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter as Harmony Station continued its orbit, a beacon of hope in the vast expanse of space. For Michael and Xander, it was more than just a symbol of interspecies cooperation. It was a home, a fresh start, and the beginning of a new chapter in their shared story.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.